We are here today with Wild Horse Fire Brigade William Simpson II. He has so much to talk about, and we're going to learn some things today. First, I want to say thank you for listening to Regime Radio with Radio Waterloo. We're here in southwestern Ontario, Kitchener Waterloo. So, talking about wild horses here is kind of maybe a fresh subject. Not everyone even is aware of wild horses. There are some Canadian wild horses as well. Um, William is actually on the border of Oregon and California. So thank you so much for coming with us here today on Regime Radio. Would you introduce yourself?
Certainly. Thank you for having me, Jennifer. And yes, I am William Simpson. I'm the executive director of Wild Horse Fire Brigade. We're an IRS accredited 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're a public benefit. We're all volunteers. And we operate in the mountains on the Oregon-California border at our research site with the herd of 200 free-roaming, naturally living American wild horses that we live with them and we study them. And we use basically a study, an observational methodology developed by Dr. Jane Goodall in Gombe, Africa. I when I was a kid, I saw her on black and white TV in the 60s, and I guess that stuck with me because after a while up here with studying the horses, I realized I was emulating what she did in Africa with the apes. I was doing it with the horses. And so, and yeah, Canada does have horses. There are horses in Alberta, and there's a nonprofit up there, Save Alberta's Wild Horses, trying to save your horses up there on that side of the border. And so it's a real tough situation out there.
It really is. And as I was preparing, like you and I talked years ago, and also thank you, Lisa Dearson, for connecting me to you. I guess maybe in 2019 or something like that, maybe even
Mhm.
earlier. So
Right.
we had you on before and talking about how even wild horses can prevent wildfires is a lot of
Mhm.
people will never have thought about this. So we're going to get into that. But you have 200 horses on the land that you live on. And if people go to your YouTube channel, for example, you can see how you work with students, come out and observe together with you and your program. So you're doing a lot of different things, clearly. But could you explain to people why it is that wild horses can have an impact on preventing wildfires?
Right. Yeah, and that's really a pretty big package to unpack. To unpack. I guess the first thing we need to explain, because a lot of people probably don't even know we had wild horses. I mean, I
Right.
run into people regularly that think they went extinct, which is not true. So all the horses in the world originally evolved right here in North America. 55 million years ago. And back then, 55 million years ago, they were real little critters, about the size of a dog. There was five different lines of horses. Some of them had three toes. The successful genetic line that came out of that evolutionary soup, if you will, was Equus caballus, the modern horse we see today. And E. caballus, the modern horse, has been around for roughly 2 million years in North America. Now, about a million years ago, we know from science, or the best information we have today is that there was a land bridge between Alaska and Siberia called the Bering Land Bridge. And so when that became available, the ocean went down and that land, it's a very shallow area between there. That land bridge became available, and animals from North America started going into Eurasia. And some of those animals were America's wild horses. And that's how Eurasia got all of its horses a million years ago. Um, Prior to a million years in Eurasia, Africa, Mesopotamia, Europe, there were no horses of any kind. There were no zebras in Africa. There were no equids anywhere in Eurasia prior to a million years ago. And but again, a million years ago, they start crossing over from North America into Eurasia. And so and then they went everywhere. They had a million years to find places to go. That's a long time, a million years. So they had a million years to cover all over that continents over there, India and Africa and Europe. And they found ecosystems, and then they evolved into those ecosystems and ways where they were basically blended in. In other words, in Africa, you see zebras. Well, those are equids with stripes, and they got those stripes because it was a survival advantage. In up in Finland and Sweden and Norway, you had the conic horses, which have real heavy fur. So they evolved to survive in that ecosystem by modifying their genotypes. And then you had the Botai horses, that Genghis Khan got a hold of and raided, when he came in and fought against other people in the early ages there. So, so they all came from America, and people need to understand that. That's the first thing we need to know. And they never went extinct because we recently in the news, I guess it was like 5 years ago, they found that frozen mammoth and that horse, the Yukon horse, in the permafrost, right? Because some of that permafrost has been melting and they're finding new stuff. Well, they found a frozen mammoth and a horse. And I mean, he was fresh frozen pretty much. It,
Mm.
it wasn't a fossil. It was there was tissue, good solid
Yeah.
tissue. So a scientist flew in from, I believe he's from Switzerland, Dr. Michael Hofreiter. I think he's a geneticist, and I think he's from Switzerland. I'm not sure, maybe Germany. But anyway, he flew in and he got tissue from the Yukon horse, which died when that mammoth died. And he examined it and he said it's the same horse as we have today. He said
Wow.
genetically, and this is an expert in the field of genetics. He said these are the same horse. The genetics are this it's the same animal. So it's
Oh.
confusing though because the scientist that found that horse got to name it. So they called it Elambe, right? And of course the average person out there who doesn't study science and you got all these different names and terminology, it's very confusing. Yeah, I mean, it really, it's, you could probably get a PhD in understanding horse evolution just in that one area because there's so much to know. It's unbelievable. So, but anyway, it is the same horse. So we have this continuum, right to today just by genetics. Okay. So he looked at the genetics of horses alive today and the Yukon horse. He says that genetically it's the same horse. So you got that. Of course, then you've got fossil records and you got all kinds of other records. In fact, there's a noted Canadian scientist, Dr. Claire, well, what's her last name? Henderson, Dr. Claire Henderson at Laval University. And she found an old journal from French explorers that from the early 1500s in North America, where they met the Sioux Lakota and they wrote about the tribe having horses in the early 1500s and hunting buffalo, and they called them here's and the real big clue in that journal is written in French, so that's why the Oklahoma museum that had the journal called her because she's bilingual. She reads and writes French and English, and she got it and read it, and she says, "Oh, okay, the clue. There's a big clue right here. These French trappers in the 1500s called them Indian ponies." And they're the
Yeah.
ones that popularized that term, Indian ponies. Well, the question is why do they call them ponies? Well, it's very simple. The answer is very simple. Where they come from in France, a horse that small is a pony because these were native horses. Native horses are little. Now, I'll talk about that just for a minute because the audience needs to understand what I mean. Um, when everybody wants to try to tell you that the Spanish introduced horses into North America. Well, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, that they didn't introduce horses. They added additional horses. There were already horses surviving the Ice Age here, and they brought their horses, and their horses were radically different. And they were different simply because a native horse, a real native wild horse that goes back to the Ice Age, they're little horses. They weigh 700, 800 pounds. We know from modern equine science that you can only put about 20% of a horse's body weight on his back. So what that means is if you have a 700, 800 pound horse, you can put about 160 pounds on its back safely. Now, full stop. You look at the Spanish horses, okay, those were cavalry horses. If you look at a conquistador with his armor, first of all, the European men, they're bigger than the Asian descendants that became the Native Americans, right? Because all the during Beringia, natives from from Europe, from Asia crossed into North America and became the indigenous people here. So they were little people to begin with, and then the Europeans came, and they're big people, and they had big horses to carry a lot of weight. You look at a conquistador with his armor, his saddle, his supplies, his weapons. He's probably 350 pounds on the back of the horse. So we just did the math a minute ago. Can you put 350 pounds on the back of an 800-pound horse? No.
Mhm.
And every university science department, Oklahoma State, Indiana, in any university equine science department will tell you it's about 20% of the horse's body weight is safe. You can't put 320 pounds or 350 pounds on the back of a little horse. It'll kill them. So they brought big cavalry horses when they came. And and of course, where did they originally get their horses a million years ago? We talked about that a minute ago. From us, they crossed over from Beringia and they went in, and then 6,000 years ago, everybody started domesticating them in Europe and Mesopotamia, Africa. They started domesticating these horses 6,000 years ago before the Europeans brought them here in
Right.
domesticated form. So
Hmm.
they're different horses. And so with that background, talking about fire, um, we have these fires, and people really, the average person doesn't know what causes these fires. There's a lot of propaganda out there. In fact, we know now that agencies in Canada and in America are monetizing wildfire. And because the timber industry isn't as profitable as it turns out. For instance, I just did an evaluation of the budget for the United States Forest Service. Okay, this is brand new. This is the 2026 appropriations bill budget for U.S. Forest Service. And the core budget shows that they're spending about 64% of their budget, this is the United States Forest Service budget, they're spending 64% of it on employment salaries. They spend 24% of it on fighting fire, and they spend 4% of it on preventing fire, and they spend 1.6% on forest management. So when you
Wow.
look at those numbers,
Yeah.
it's designed, the budget is designed to ensure monetization of fire. Now, if you didn't want fire, if you were trying to end wildfire, what would you do? Well, you would put the emphasis on prevention, right? You wouldn't have a lousy 4% for prevention and
Yeah.
have everything else about firefighting. You would have prevention like maybe 40% or 50% of the budget, and then everything else after that. That's not what they're doing. And so, but getting back to why do we have these fires? Well, it's really pretty simple. The fires we see today are a function of prodigious grass and brush. We've never had so much vegetative material across the landscape as we do right now, especially in the western United States. And so and it's because our herbivores are gone, our deer, our elk, the hunting industry, disease, vehicular accidents have decimated our cervid population, which is deer, elk, moose. They've been wiped out largely by overhunting and these other things. And so, for instance, in California, we're down to 1.5 million deer, Jennifer. That's a lot of deer gone. That's just one state. 1.5 million deer that were here in the 70s are now gone. And that's important because they're like lawnmowers. 1.5 million deer will eat every year, they'll eat of almost 2 million tons of grass and brush.
Wow.
So that's every year. And it comes back. Every year it comes back. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like your lawn. You got to mow your lawn all the time, right? Because it keeps growing. And so people don't understand it's the same way in the wilderness. The grass grows every year and it grows tall if you don't mow the lawn. Mother Nature had lawnmowers. and they're called deer and elk and wild horses. And when you remove them, what happens? Well, the grass grows 3 feet tall, and then when it burns abnormally hot, and that
Yeah.
kills the forest and everything in it. And it creates this new smoke. The smoke we have right now is abnormal. It's not the same as it was 30 years ago because there's a new kind of chemistry. When you do chemistry at different temperatures, you get different resulting compounds. You can burn the same things, but when you
Wow.
burn the same things at a hotter temperature, it produces new things. Well, that's
Oh,
what's happening. The fires now are so hot. We see molten aluminum engine blocks, molten aluminum ladders, mag wheels on cars are molten. That help. Aluminum melts at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. So we haven't seen this before, Jennifer. This is shocking, and people need to pay attention. We're getting clues. We're being given clues. Hey, look at this. This is not right. This isn't normal. You know, when you see a whole forest of fire-evolved conifers get burned, that's a real wake-up call because those trees are evolved to withstand normal wildfire. They are evolved. They have special bark, so they can handle normal fire. The fires aren't normal. That's what I'm saying here. They're not normal. They're not normal because we wiped out the lawnmowers, the deer and the elk. The grass is too high. It burns abnormally hot, and it wipes out the forest and all the wildlife. So if we don't get a grip on this quickly, pretty quick, we won't have, besides everybody dying from the smoke, you know, like my wife, Laura was killed by toxins from this smoke. See, I didn't know anything about, I knew there was something weird going on because nobody ever died from a campfire. Nobody ever died from a wildfires back in the 60s and 70s. The smoke, you know, if you got burned, you got dead. But um, you know, when Laura was struggling with this smoke induced it was a neurological attack. Basically, it was an autoimmune neurological degenerative disease caused by a toxin in the smoke, and it convinced her own antibodies. It rewired her antibodies to think her brain was a pathogen. So her own antibodies attacked her brain and killed her. And so in 2019, when that happened, you know, I really didn't have access to any of the science that we have just now. Just now, there's brand new science that came out that validate my suspicion back then. I knew there was something weird, and I kept talking about novel compounds, but I couldn't identify them. I knew there was something new in the smoke, and I knew that because I studied science in college. There's something new going on, and I got lung damage from it. But anyway, and then lo and behold, in 2024, UCLA issued a 11-year study. UCLA had been studying this whole time, and I had no idea, of course. But they
wow.
published in 2024, and they said that in California, 5,000 Californians die prematurely every year from wildfire smoke now.
Oh, wow.
5,000 people die prematurely, men, women, and children. Laura was one of those 5,000 that year in 2019. There was
Yeah.
5,000, basically 5,000 other dead people that nobody could save. When you get this autoimmune degenerative disease, it can cause all kinds of problems and it can kill you. Now, UCLA says in their 11-year study, 55,000 people died prematurely. They died. They're dead. And the economic damage, and this is a published study, by the way. Anybody in your audience can find it. They just need to Google UCLA death toll wildfire smoke. The study comes up. The newspapers have been told not to print it. They're under orders not to print it. You know, we have,
Wow.
by the way, censorship is alive and well in America. Just
Yeah, in
just to
Canada.
make sure people in Canada understand, you've got it there. We've got it here too. Don't this It used to be the land of the land of the brave and the home of the free and all that good stuff. Those days it seemed to be in the rearview mirror, and we need to people need to start fixing that quick. That's another big problem we got. But they censor it. You know why? The government doesn't have an answer. They don't have an answer. And the reason they don't have an answer is they know what the causation is. They know the collapse of the herbivory and they know it's the smoke, but they're making so much money fighting fire that they don't want to ruin somebody's business model, even though if it's killing 5,000 people in California a year. By the way, and I took that study and I put it in a supercomputer because that was just for one state. 55,000 people dead in 11 years, 5,000 a year. and 435 billion in damage. That was dollars, 435 billion dollars in economic impact. So I dropped it into a supercomputer. I said, well, hold it. That's just one state. All of us are getting smoke. So it's the same thing. It's just these other states didn't do a study yet, right? So the
Okay.
universities haven't gotten, UCLA was first to do the study. So I dropped it in a supercomputer. I said, just please extrapolate this in the Western United States. And the numbers that came back just were shocking. It said that about 36,000 people die every year prematurely in the Western United States from smoke, men, women, children. You don't have to be engulfed in the smoke. You could be 100 miles away. If you breathe the toxins, it kills you because if you're genetically susceptible, you die. It's just like any disease. These chemicals will impact certain people in certain ways based upon your genetics. And
Yeah.
so 6,000 people a year dead in the Western United States, prematurely dead. And the cost of that is $218 billion a year.
Wow.
That's smoke only. That's just the smoke from the wildfires. That has nothing to do with property and casualty damages, which is 50 billion a year. That's what the insurance is having to cover. So anyway, so they don't want to talk about it because they don't have a solution, but I do have a solution, which is our Wild Horse Fire Brigade. You put these horses back out because we're holding right now about 70,000 horses in government holding camps. It's like a prison the taxpayers pay for. They round up all the little horses, break up the families, they brand them, sterilize them all. It's a horrible thing they do. It's a holocaust of horses, is what it is. And I don't mean any insult to the Jews that survived the Nazis in Europe. Um, I mean, this is a type of holocaust of the wild horses, which the Sioux Lakota consider a nation. They always call them the horse nation. I see them as people out here. When I look at my herd like they're my neighbors, they're people to me because they're sentient beings that are extremely smart. But so they put them in these prison camps, and where it's horrible conditions. It's not their natural ecosystem, and they pay ranchers $1,400 for each horse every year that they have. So $1,400 per horse per year is what they get to keep them in prison. And so the U.S. taxpayers are paying up for that program about $150 million a year because they got to buy hay and feed the horses. So the business model for the ranchers, you buy the cheapest hay money can buy, give that to the horses and pocket the difference as your profit. So that's their
Wow.
business model. It's a horrible thing. So we've got all these horses, and all we have to do is move them. It's a cash positive business deal for everybody because I mean those ranchers can go find jobs. That's too bad because compared to the 36,000 people getting dead every year prematurely, those guys, I don't care about 100 ranchers that maybe lose a contract. I'm looking at the 36,000 people and their families who suffer when their loved ones die. That's what I'm looking at. See, they're selfish. Those people are being selfish. That's wrong. That is wrong. They need to just go away. They need to go flip burgers or what, get a job. But doing what they do, keeping those horses in jail, when we can put them out here and they'll stop these fires and reduce those catastrophic losses in life and in money, if you have a 5% impact on all those dead people and all that, $218 billion a year, 5% impact of 218 billion is a lot of money every year we save. And then we have other horses that they want to round up for economic reasons because they're in the way of public land development and monetization. You're having the problem in Canada. We have it here. The big corporations that run our countries, they're not run by politics. That's a kabuki show. The corporations with all the money fund the politicians. The politicians get rich by campaign donations. Okay. So, and who's giving them that money? It's not us. It's the big corporations that wield trillions of dollars a year. They decide who's going to be the next winner. Voting is an illusion for voters to make us feel like we have power. But the reality is the corporations, you can't beat these corporations. Like, you look at in America, we're talking $50 trillion in corporate America dollars. That's a huge multiple of the entire United States government's budget. We're little kids compared to these corporations. And Nero said this a long time ago, when he ruled Rome. Nero said, "He who has the gold makes the rules." That is still true today. I got news for everybody. That rule still is true. So these corporations run the whole show around the planet, and they're going to get that land. They will get that public land for their uses, which is gas, minerals, oil, and livestock production. They're going to get it. You can't beat them. You can't beat Godzilla with a BB gun. Can't be done. What can we do? Well, Sun Tzu in The Art of War tells us what we can do. If you're confronting an enemy that's superior, avoid conflict. That's what you got to do. Now, we have to avoid conflict. Well, how do we avoid conflict? What we do is we offer the corporations a plan, our plan, Wild Horse Fire Brigade, which is okay, you don't need to kill the horses to get what you want. Well, you can have it. Just let us have the horses, and we put them in the wilderness where they don't want this land out here. You can't do anything with it. It's way too rugged. You can't do livestock. There's too many predators, bears, wolves, lions, and it's too rugged. You can't even hardly get out there with a four-wheel drive. But horses love it. We have millions of acres of that kind of land. Horses love it. That's where I live. They love it here. They love it. They run around on lava rocks all day long. And
Mm.
you can't do anything out here. You can't do farming. You can hardly walk around out here without breaking your ankles. The horses love it. And so we could move all these horses out of the way and let them live wild and free. And that's, by the way, in these deep wilderness, that's where all the fire and smoke comes from. It comes roaring out of the wilderness into the towns and burns you down. And the smoke spreads all over the United States and kills all these thousands of people. Well, let's just stop it at the source. You're Scandinavian, right? So you probably grew up with the adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now I don't know how they would say that there, but we grew up on the ranch that way. My mom always said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, if we don't have to, like, the fire guys are always going to have fire. We're not going to crush their budget, but we can save a lot of lives and save a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I gave you a real long segment there, and I'm
Wow. No,
sorry
that's
for.
amazing information. I mean, it makes so much sense what you're saying, and it's such an uphill battle when you put it like that. But I like how you explain it that we gotta avoid conflict, but still offer a solution. Like that's really putting the hammer on the nail kind of thing. I like that. So, do you get any positive responses from politicians about this?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's politics and government funding and momentum is a very difficult thing to start turning. They have a lot of moment of inertia. It's like a lot of people don't realize when you see one of those big oil tankers, it's 400 feet long out there. It takes them 25 miles to slow down. If they put the propellers in stop, they still go for 25 miles before they stop because it's called moment of inertia. And so it's the same thing with government and funding and government direction. You're trying to turn a ship of state that has all this momentum, and it's a slow process. I mean, even when it's going as fast as it can, it's it's a slow process, right? So,
Wow.
but the good news here is our plan makes everybody more money. The only losers are those few handful of ranchers that are prisoners, they're prison guards. They got to go get jobs. I'm sorry. I grew up, I was a rancher. I dug plenty of post holes. That's the only reason I'm probably still alive at 73 because I worked my butt off my whole life. But, I understand ranching. They got to get new jobs because I don't care if 100 people lose their jobs. If I'm going to save 36,000 people's lives, men, women, and children every year, if I can save their lives and save hundreds of billions of dollars, I'm doing that. They can go flip burgers. I'm sorry. So
That's
that's just the way that's got to be. And so, but the corporations are the big winners because, see, the big corporations know these horses are native species. They know it. They're not stupid. And they know that they're almost extinct. And, but the problem for them, if I'm corporate America, the last thing I want is a native species wild horse on the public land I want to develop because they're under 100,000 right now, and that makes them an endangered species. And in America, when you get endangered species listing, everything on the land stops. You can't do anything. So that's a corporate boardroom nightmare. That's a shareholder nightmare. Because if I'm in the oil business or the gas business or the livestock business, and I've got an endangered species that just is announced on the land that I wanted to use or develop, I may be out of business or I'm going to have a lot of shareholder loss. I'm going to have to, as a CEO, I'd have to go to my board and my shareholders and say, well, the quarterly report this year is going to be lousy because we have an endangered species we're dealing with now. See, and it's all about the money. It's all about
Yeah.
the money. So my plan is you don't have to lie and call them invasive to get rid of them. We can be honest about it. They're native, so let's just move them. Problem solved. You get the land, you can go forth and do what you need to do. You're going to do it anyway. They're going to kill all the horses and do it
Mhm.
anyway. So why not move the horses out of the way and get them off the battlefield? I mean, every general in a war will tell you if you're losing the war, you move your men off the battlefield. You don't let them sit there and get slaughtered to the last guy because that's what we're doing right now. The advocates that don't like my model, they're participating with the BLM. They're sterilizing the horses and getting paid to do it. That's helping them do their job of exterminating them. Because when you end the genetic line, as soon as you
Yeah.
sterilize a horse, that's it. You've lost genetics, you don't know what you've got, and you've interfered with natural selection at multiple levels. People think natural selection is just limited to um, a lion catching a horse and eating it, which happens, by the way, a lot. All the predators in North America are the co-evolved predators of horses. All of them. Wolves, lions, coyotes, wolves, they all eat horses. Grizzly bears, they all eat horses. All of them. The BLM will tell you they have no natural predators. That's just a flat out lie. That is a complete, they should go to jail for that. That is criminal. That's criminal. That's perjury. They're lying to the public. Every co-evolved apex predator is a predator of American wild horses. Every one of them. And even up here where I am, my herd, the BLM says, oh yeah, if you have horses, the population doubles every 4 years. That's false. That's false. They double every 4 years, where the USDA hunters have killed all the predators around the livestock. Because what they've done is they've merged livestock grazing with the wild horse areas. So the livestock guys don't want any predators. So they kill them all. Well, when you've killed all the predators of the horses, what happens? they're gonna multiply like the cattle do then, because that's the design, right? So whose fault was that? Is that the horse's fault? Is that the fault of, does that disintermediate natural evolutionary coevolution of the predator and the horse? No, it's just a bunch of baloney that the BLM puts out there that helps support the eradication of horses. And so we need to just, they need to be put in their place. They need to stop lying to the public, number one. And number two, we just need to move the horses out of the way and let the big corporations have what they're going to get anyway. But I have to fight with people making money off of this, the plight of the horses all the time. I have nonprofits like the American Wild Horse Campaign, or they call themselves American Wild Horse Conservation now. They rebranded. It's like a restaurant that had bad food and they want to try to get new customers. They go new under new management, on the
Okay.
outside of the restaurant. Yeah. So that's what they did. They rebranded as American Wild Horse Conservation. Same business model. Running around shooting horses with high-powered gas-operated rifles, shooting a big heavy syringe that can kill the horse, it can break bones, causes bleeding, genetic disintermediation. It's a nightmare. And the BLM gives them money to do it. Why would the BLM give them money to do it? Because it helps them. They don't care about saving wild horses. And what's worse is the people doing it, American Wild Horse Campaign tells the public that it stops roundups. Well, that's a bunch of baloney too. How does it stop a roundup? Let's analyze that statement for a minute. Does a sterilized horse eat and drink as much water as a normal horse?
Yeah.
Course, absolutely. What did you didn't take his teeth out or anything, did you? You didn't like put a gastric band over their stomach, did you? No, they're going to eat and drink just as much. So, have you solved the problem that's causing the roundups? What's causing the roundups? The competition for grass and water for livestock. That's what causes the roundups. So, if you sterilize the horse, did you solve the problem? No, you haven't solved anything. All you did was torture a horse so you could get a bunch of money from the BLM and end their genetic lines, which, furthers along the extermination process. Um, so I'm at odds with American Wild Horse Campaign. I tell them flat out that they're wrong. Their policies are killing horses. They want me to collaborate with them because they know I'm the only scientist that's lived with a herd of horses this long. I have over 25,000 hours of close range observation. And what I mean by that is I don't need a telephoto lens as long as my leg that costs more than my truck. Now, that's what all the other so called experts use. They run around out there taking pictures, makes it look like they're close up, but they're using a telephoto lens that costs $8,000. And, so they don't know anything about horses, really. They got great pictures, but what do they really know? Let's analyze that for a second. If, let's say you live across the street from some people in a house, so you got two houses and a street in between, and you live in one house, there's people in these other houses, and you're a private investigator. And I say, Jennifer, you're a private investigator. I want you to find out everything about those people in that house across the street. Here's a telephoto lens, a camera, a recorder, a notebook. And for a whole year, you watch them constantly from across the street. So, what do you really know at the end of the year? When the milkman comes, when they come and go from the house, can you tell me which hand the guy uses to brush his teeth with in the bathroom?
Right.
Can you
No,
tell me what's in their can you tell me what's in their refrigerator? No. You can't
no.
tell me really anything. You know a little bit. And you're right across the street 24/7 for a whole year. Don't know anything. Now, if you want to learn about those people in that house, what do? You move in with them. When you move in with them, you're going to know who snores, who's in the bathroom too long, who's that's in the refrigerator, who eats all the food. You're going to know everything about those people in that house. So that's what we did. I moved in with the horses. I live with them. And these scientists that claim they know about horses, they're like the people across the street looking. They're never going to learn anything about horses because they're stuck across the street. So, there's really nobody out there. So American Wild Horse Campaign and a lot of other people want me to collaborate with them so they can get some windage off of my reputation from living among the herds. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be their poster child and get them extra money in any way, shape, or form because they're killing horses. They're killing it slowly with genetic extermination, but it doesn't matter to me. From my chair, anybody that's hurting horses in any way are people I cannot work with. If they're hurting them, because they're like people to me. Anybody that
Yeah.
hurts people, other people or a child, I can't work with them. They're evil. That's evil. And I just can't work with those people. I've told them if they want to join us and learn how to do it right, that our doors are wide open. Wide open. I will collaborate, wide open. I will train them. I'll teach them how to do it right. But do you think they would take that opportunity? I had a 1 hour meeting with the new interim executive director of American Wild Horse Conservation, Patricia Miller. I had a 1 hour Zoom with her, and I flung the doors open. I said, "Look, Patricia, if you guys want to learn how to do it, we could collaborate." But I told her, I said, "I am not going to endorse sterilization. You can couch it any way you want. And they use different terms. They love wordsmithing to confuse the public. They call it fertility vaccine. They call it fertility control. They call it contraception. The bottom line is they're using a high-powered gas-operated rifle that will break bone. That's how powerful it is. You got to think about it for a minute. It's shooting a projectile 10 times heavier than a bullet out of a hunting rifle. Okay, so this is physics. So when you're shooting something really heavy, you have to put a lot of velocity on it. Otherwise, it just goes like this. It just goes boom straight into the ground.
Oh,
You have
yeah.
to launch it out there. So it needs to have a lot of velocity. And because it's so heavy, E equals MC squared, right? The energy of impact. Okay. So you're shooting a projectile that is so heavy and moving so fast that if it hits bone, it could break it. And the guys who designed the system, those rifles and everything, say that. Marburg and Krieger, they're the ones who designed that system for anesthetizing like grizzly bears and rhinos. And they only do it to one animal in the whole group. They don't do it to all the animals like American Wild Horse Conservation is. They're out there shooting all the horses. Krieger and Marburg designed it to just do a sampling, a genetic of one animal out of the whole herd or the whole, like a group of bears, one bear or one rhino, because they got to get some scientific data, right? They got to get some DNA, a little bit of blood, and then they anesthetize them. They shoot this rifle and it makes them go to sleep, and then they do their measurements and everything they got to do, and then they give them an antidote, and then the animal wakes up and runs away. But they design it for infrequent use. Well, these people were out there just blazing away, and a lot of horses end up dead on the land. They bleed out. If you hit a vein, the syringe is huge. It's a giant needle. And then the stuff that's in there is a genetic poison. And there's two kinds of PZP. People don't even know this. There's the kind they use on livestock, and then there's the kind they use on horses. The kind they use on horses has an oil-based adjuvant that has a tuberculin toxin in it. And so the oil, the carrier, the oil, it's a cellular solvent. In other words, it dissolves cell walls, this oil.
Oh my
So it
goodness.
causes necrosis and it causes granulomas to form. And then the
Oh,
tuberculin toxin that's in there is designed to make to trigger the ovaries to being, basically unable to accept sperm. So the bottom line is it renders the mare sterile, but the tuberculin toxin also triggers a lot of autoimmune responses. So inflammatory diseases and all kinds of other things. So they're hurting these horses, and then they're stalking them to shoot them, and they're harassing them. That's against the preamble to the 1971 Act. That is a command. It says you should not harass them. Well, let's see. If I chase them around with a rifle and I shoot at them, I think that's harassment, and they're doing that too. So can I collaborate with them? No. Anybody doing that, I cannot collaborate with them, and I will not collaborate with them. Now, if they want to learn how to do it right, they're not going to make as much money. That's for sure. And that's probably why they don't want to work with me. See, I'm not going to work with them because they're killing horses. They won't work with me because they don't make any money. I'm here to save the horses. I don't care about the money. I'd rather eat rice every day for the rest of my life. I don't have much more than that. I live on Social Security. I made a lot of money when I was a corporate CEO, no doubt. I mean, I went sailing for 4 years straight on a $500,000 boat I built. So that was featured on National Geographic. They made a show about my boat. And
mhm.
I had money, but then when I came back, I sold my boat and I put all of my money into saving the land for the horses and setting up our research site. And now I'm broke. But it was worth it. It was worth doing. And fortunately for the nonprofit, we have money to carry on our programs. And so we are just to kind of as a little news flash for your audience, we're actually starting a natural horse behavior certificate program. So the university program wasn't really good for us. It was great for the students, but the university wasn't contributing. We taught wild horse ecology up here for 3 years, and the students absolutely loved it. But the university would not give us funding, and we were spending donations. We spent about 40, 50,000 almost on the program, but it just benefited the university. It was parasitic. So, we need to do something bigger and better than that. I mean, I love teaching, but the sphere of influence of students, it's going to take them 10 years to get into their prime and having, their careers and a sphere of influence. Our board started thinking about that. We said, what if we start training equine professionals right now who already have hundreds or thousands of clients and doing
Yeah.
equine assisted therapy and training and dressage, getting and learning about a wild horse. the way we can teach it, I can walk you up. If you come here, Jennifer, we'll be happy to introduce you to wild horses. When you're with me, they think you're part of my family. That's how they look at the world. They see me as just another critter with a family. And when people are with me, they say, "Oh, Bill's got a new family. Let's go meet him." Because they're very social. If you haven't tortured them, they're very social. The
Yeah.
BLM horses have been triggered to for the last 50 years. Every time people show up at the herd areas, they're cowboys, they're rounding them up and roping them, or helicopters chasing them, or people shooting them with rifles with genetic poison. When people show up, those horses on the herd areas know nothing good ever happens. It's always something bad. And that's been going on for 40 years now. So when people show up, even they don't care if you're a scientist, they don't care if you're trying to study them at a distance across the street from the house, like I said. They don't care
Yeah.
about any of that. As soon as they see you, they go, "Uh-oh, there's a human. Something bad's going to happen. We better get the hell out of here." They're not stupid. So they're triggered. Now our presence triggers them. When if we went back in time, let's say we went back in time 500 years before the Europeans were here, when the indigenous people co-evolved, they were living alongside the horses like I do for 30, 40,000 years. So they were friends. Yeah, they did take horses for riding, but you know how they did it? They made friends with the horse, and then the horse let them ride. They didn't beat them down like the Mexicans do. You know, the Mexican way of breaking a horse, they're the caballeros. You know, you tie the head of the horse to a post in the ground and you whip them with all kinds of stuff. Paper bags or tarps or whips, and you break them down. You make them submit, and that breaks the horse's will. And it breaks their free spirit. Um, Basically, you're asserting yourself over them as I'm more powerful than you, and you're going to do what I tell you. So you're the conquering agent. That's no way to have a relationship with a horse that you need, but the way the indigenous people used to do it is they lived alongside them just like I do. I have horses here that I could easily make into a riding horse because they love me. They come up, they want to scratch. I scratch them, they scratch me back. We're buddies. I lean on their backs, to scratch them real hard. They like their back scratched when they're babies. If I wanted to train them with a saddle, they'd let me do it. They'd let me, it would be just a natural progression of a friendship instead of like forcing them. And
Yeah.
but the indigenous, that's how they did it. They built a relationship just like you would with your dog. How do you get a dog trained? You train him with treats. You be friends with your dog. You don't beat him to make him do what you want,
No.
right? You don't scare them into doing what you want. You be friends, and then they do whatever they want to please you then because they're your friend. And so the indigenous people a lot of them have lost their ways. In fact, on the borders of the United States, the northern tribes and the southern tribes actually sell horses into the slaughter auction. So they've lost their respect for the horse nation. It'd be like selling humans into human trafficking.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. To me, it's the same thing. You don't sell your brother or your sister into a meat factory because I see these horses as family. They're family to me and to Michelle and my partner here, Michelle. She's part Cherokee, and so she has that epigenetic relationship that Bruce Lipton talks about, Dr. Bruce Lipton, when he talks about the biology of belief and epigenetic progression. When you live alongside an animal in a coevolutionary fashion, it changes you genetically. You get genetic variation. That's called an epigenetic modification. But when you do it for thousands of years, like the indigenous people did, you actually become almost like kin to those horses. And that's what a lot of the indigenous people 500 years ago had that special relationship with the horse. And the Lakota and the Sioux Lakota and the Cherokee and mostly the Plains tribes, because they worked with the horses so much and lived with them, they had a real special relationship with the horse, and they called them the Horse Nation. They respected their culture and their society, and in a very sincere way. It wasn't, just it wasn't fake like we do things today. They really respected them, and so that we need to bring that back. We need to understand how powerful they are, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about. I'm using music now to try to
Yeah, your
spread the word.
songs. I was on the
Right.
YouTube channel, and I know you sent me Spirit Horse, which is so nice, but you have a couple of more songs on the YouTube. So that's fairly new for you to be writing songs.
It is. It
Mm,
is. I've been writing poetry for the last 12 years since I've been in the wilderness about life here. And so when I realized that AI would let me have a voice would sing my poetry, because I can't sing because of lung damage, but um, with AI, I can take my poetry and make music with it and have an
yeah, that's
AI
a big
voice sing
tool
it
for
for
that.
me, at least
Yeah.
until I find an artist that will cover my songs. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's another way to spread the knowledge, and it's sort of a feeling that you get from the horse through
Mhm.
music. And so, Spirit Horse was a song that I got from pretty much hanging out with the spirit horses here. I was inspired to those words from them. Basically, it's their it's a message from them to us as humans, is what Spirit Horse is about.
We'll share it as well over this hour when the show goes out. It's really
Right
nice.
on.
It's very emotional song. It really does resonate as if from the wild horse perspective.
Yeah, it's the voice of a horse, basically. When I tried to pick an AI voice would be, the spirit horse. So it's from them to us. I was
Hmm.
just a translator, basically.
Yeah. So of these 200 horses that you have where you're at, they have never been gelded. They've never been any contraception. These are actually viable horses. Whereas
Yeah.
on the BLM lands and the fisheries, like all of the different management areas, how many horses have actually never been, sterilized or gelded? Do you know the
Well, we
number?
have, yeah, roughly, we had about 120 horses that were here that came down through the ages, and there was a little bit of inbreeding from cavalry horses and stuff, but we still have these horses. You can see they're native because they're little. That's the giveaway. They're little horse, full grown, 5, 6 years, little though, little stature. And but then we've rescued almost 100 horses from either the BLM the auctions where there was BLM horses going to Mexico for slaughter. So some of our volunteer advocates go to these auctions and they buy the horses, so they don't they look for the ones with the BLM freeze brand on the neck because they were rounded up, and it's really a federal offense to slaughter a protected American horse.
Yeah.
So they get them out of there, they buy them, and then we put them in quarantine in Kansas. We have a yard we work with, and they have to be there for 30 days. And then they get a veterinarian looks at them all, make sure they have Coggins shots, and then we transport them and we let them go. We rewild them into our herd, and we needed to do that exercise. So almost 100 horses we've rewilded that were going to be cat food or dog food. And then we watched what happened. Well, what was interesting is that the wild herd here welcomed them in, and they got adopted into different families, just like
Oh,
humans do.
wow.
It was really cool. Yeah, so they all found a family where they fit,
Mhm.
because they're just like people. Every one of these horses has a different personality, and they all found families, and then they're all part of the wild family bands. So the geldings become guardian uncles and lieutenants. So a gelding, like if a mare has a new little baby, that gelding will be assigned to protect her and her baby from
Wow.
everybody. He'll keep anybody from taking her food or any animals from attacking her or her baby. He'll until that baby gets to a certain age, and then he'll go off again on his own. but they get work assignments and they all do their jobs. They have a very intricate society. They have
Hmm.
rituals, they have customs, they have greeting customs. Like when you greet a wild horse, there's a protocol for that that most people don't know. And there's a way you can meet a horse that's acceptable to them. It's got to be, and it's not our rules that count; it's their rules. We're in their world, so we have to know what their rules are. And people
Hmm.
just don't know what their rules are. So when people come up here and I teach them about the natural horse, I let them know here's how it all works, And I think for our certificate program in natural horse behavior, people that are in dressage or trainers or equine assisted therapists, I can teach them enough about the real horse. Because when you're working with domestic horses, there's layers. It's like an onion. You got to figure out, okay, what happened during training? Was it abused? What are
Yeah.
the domestic problems in this horse? So if you start out by understanding what a real horse is like, you can get through the layers really quickly because you understand what the primitive instincts and behaviors are. And then you work from that forward. And it gives you a big advantage as a trainer or as an equine therapist.
That sounds really interesting, Bill. So we are coming to the end of our hour. I would love to speak with you more, get more into the details about all of this. I have more questions now, but the hour is done. So can you please share with people how to find you online as well as the certificate program? Please keep us in the loop about that.
Right. So it's wildhorsefirebrigade.org. So four words, wildhorsefirebrigade.org. And if people that forget that, they could just Google Wild Horse Fire Brigade and find us real easy on the internet. And we're a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. We're all volunteers, so we survive by donation, and the certificate program will be donation funded. So people that participate will, we expect them to help out with the program, like a volunteer would. And um, yeah, and we hope that people visit our Facebook page. We got a Facebook page. We've got an X account. We've got a YouTube account. We have 331 videos at YouTube that show what we do. We're the only ones that have this, by the way. We actually film what we're doing out here in the wilderness, and night and day, every day. 12 years now for me, and 6 years for Michelle. So we hope people will attend our course because we think it will be very enlightening for them and money well spent. So um, we hope that the people would sign up. We only do four people at a time too because we give personal attention and make sure that they really understand what's going on.
When are you hoping to start those?
In June, we're going to start
Oh,
we're
just around the
starting the first
corner.
program. Yep, absolutely. Yep. We got to get on it. The more people that know about wild horses, the better.
Hmm. Well, thank you, Will. It's been very, very informative. Really appreciate your time. And I hope that the audience as well will get something interesting. And wildfires are affecting us here in Canada as well on the West Coast and also here in Ontario, where I'm at, all across the country, actually. So it's a very relevant issue for all of us. So thank you for listening to Radio Waterloo, CKMS 102.7 FM. I'm Jennifer here with William Simpson II out in Oregon, California border. So very, very far away from us here in Southwestern Ontario. But we appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.